Hi, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to today's LDSIG Virtual Clinic today with Jonathan Jones. We'll go ahead and get started on that right away. Thank you. I want to thank Jonathan for joining us today on this with this clinic. Many of you might know Jonathan. He's shared many things in this in the model railroad community and appreciate his thing. Like I said, I will
Sorry,
mute
I don't know
everybody.
what to do. Anything else? I don't know. There's no icon on there. It's not like the.
All right, so I just muted everybody. And I'll unmute you, Jonathan, here in a second and let you go ahead and share. You will see a poll pop up. Please, last time I made a mistake and the poll didn't work. It'll take you 30 seconds to answer a couple questions. Really important for us for putting these on. And I want to make sure I turn back on Jonathan. Jonathan, you should have got a request to unmute.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna remove my spotlight and let's go ahead and get started.
All right. Should I go ahead and share?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's see. Full screen this guy. There we go. All right. How does that look, Chris?
Oh, that's good. We got the one thin bar at the bottom, but I think that's good.
Okay, great. All right. Should I just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, go ahead and start.
Okay, all right, all right. So thank you, everyone, for joining this presentation tonight, and thank you, Chris, for putting this together. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about my Central Railroad of New Jersey layout. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first iteration of it, as well as the new extension. But I will say that the focus of this talk tonight is, while it is layout design, it's not going to be so much on, curve radii or, what types of switches I used or control system or that sort of thing. The real meat of this presentation and what I would like to leave all of you with is to discuss some of the some alternative ideas for designing and gaining inspiration for designing a layout and producing a layout that looks very different and that shows our trains in a different light. I think there are a lot of alternative sources that can be used to get ideas to design a layout, and I just want to show you some of those sources and how I use them to design my layout, in the hope that these ideas are something that you all can pick up and use designing your layouts, either current or in the future. So with that said, we will get started. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Oh, hold on, let me turn this page. Why is that? There we go. Okay. All right. So humble beginnings. So just a little bit about myself and how I came to model the Newark branch. On the upper left, you'll see my very first layout, which was a 4x8 layout I built when I was between the ages of 12 and I'd say maybe 14 or 15 years old. Not much by today's standards, but we all have to start somewhere. And I like to show this image because, again, it just shows, we all start at the beginning, and even those first layouts are a tremendous help in our hobby trajectory, teaching us those very important first first skills. On the lower left, you'll see my layout that I built in the early 2000s. This was my first foray into urban modeling. I started this layout when I was in architecture school and finished it once I had graduated and moved to New York City. And I had decided to get into urban modeling, and this was the result. This was a freelanced HO scale shelf layout. It was about 2 by 10 feet. I was very fortunate to have it featured in Model Railroader all those years ago. But once I did this shelf switching layout with the urban theme, I decided that this was something that I really enjoyed, and I was able to discover some of the aspects of the hobby that I really enjoyed, which included, hand laying tracks, scratch building, layout design, and the urban scene. So fast forward a few years from there, and you'll see on the right side of this slide, you'll see an article that I found in my voluminous stack of old model railroaders from 1986. And this was an article by Vic Roseman, who was a real Central Railroad of New Jersey aficionado. And I saw this article, and I just happened to pick it up and read through it. And I was like, this is perfect. It's urban, it's very heavy industrial. It seemed to maximize all the things that I liked, and it was a fairly small prototype railroad, at being only about 6.5 miles long or so. With that decided, what made the Newark branch interesting? Well, here's a map of the Newark branch, and you'll see it runs from Newark all the way to Jersey City. It had a number of industries and a number of connections to other railroads. And it had a number of other interesting features, like a Y that allowed you to turn south so that you could get to point south and west on the Central Railroad of New Jersey. There was a full-size yard in that Y, which was another interesting aspect of the line. As you traversed the line and went toward Jersey City, you ran through a lot of stations. There was a lot of heavy industry along this part of the line. And then when you ended in Jersey City, it ended in a really beautiful station, and you could take a ferry from Jersey City to Manhattan. And the Central Railroad of New Jersey also had freight terminals along the Brooklyn waterfront, and this is where a lot of them would leave from on their way to Brooklyn. So this just seemed to be a really interesting line to follow and to model. It was not too big. It had parts and pieces that I could sort of cut off and model by themselves, or link them together into a larger layout if I had the space and the time. So there were just all of these things that I thought it had going for it. So continuing on that note, you'll see on the right, you'll see a line diagram of the Central Railroad of New Jersey. Again, you can see it's about 6.5 miles long or so. And the square, the rectangle in the trapezoid area is the part of the CNJ Newark branch that I'm modeling. The portion that you see that's shaded red is the second iteration of the Central Railroad of New Jersey that I'm modeling. Whereas the first one, which is in the plain non-shaded rectangle, that just went from Newark to East Ferry Street Station. And then the new version, which we'll see more of, included Burroughs Junction, which was the western leg of the Y at Burroughs Yard. So some of the things this railroad had going for it, it was small. It had a lot of urban scenery, an elevated railroad line for much of the route. A lot of heavy infrastructure, which you don't normally associate with a branch line. It had a lot of other mainline features like signals, semaphore signals, interlocking towers. It had a lot of heavy industry, and it had some really interesting motive power. And best of all, it had some interesting operations, everything from switching along the line to passenger trains, both commuter trains and long distance trains, with interesting operations just by themselves. So it really just had a mix of everything. And again, there were parts and pieces that I could cut off and model just as a layout in and of themselves. So on the left, you'll see the traveler's end of the Central Railroad of New Jersey, Newark branch. This is the station entry facing Broad Street, which is still there today, although the station is no longer in use. But this presented a very nondescript but very elegant entry to the station if you were arriving there from the street and headed to your train. On the right side, you'll see the opposite end of the station, the business end, so to speak. And you can see the station platforms, the express building on the right with the smokestack. And you can see how this is all buried within the urban context of Newark, New Jersey. You can even see there's a cemetery off there all the way to the right side. So everything or anything can be next to anything in this urban situation, which was something that really, really intrigued me. This photo looks to have been taken approximately, I'd say, shortly after World War I, soon after the terminal was finished. It looks like there's still a lot of construction activity around, which is where you see these piles of sand and whatnot. So it looks like this is fairly new. I see some weathering here, so it's probably been in use for a couple of years, but it's still pretty new. Heavy infrastructure. This was a real boon for me because I just thought it was something that you just don't normally see with a branch line. You can see the embankments on the photo on the left. And also you get a sense of the size and scale of some of this infrastructure with the photo on the right. You can look at the size of the people in that photo against the size of the abutment and the height of those bridge girders, and you really get a sense of how massive some of this infrastructure was. Classic industries. There were several industries along the line, many of which are famous or which we might recognize, including Celanese, Ballantine Ale, Naparano Iron and Metal, which is there's sort of an infamous scrapyard in the New York, New Jersey area. I think there were a lot of steam locomotives that met their demise at that industry. But as you can see, just so many of these classic industries to choose from, and they would have taken all sorts of cars and commodities. And again, this just sort of built up the interest in doing and making a model of the CNJ Newark branch. Okay, interesting motive power. Shown here are two of the typical types of diesel locomotives used on the line. These are all available either in HO or N scale. I happen to be modeling at N scale, but these are easily available. These units are made by Atlas and Congo. They run great. There are occasionally you would see on the line various end cab switchers like Baldwin VO1000s, also made by Atlas and Kato and N scale, and for passenger service and commuter service, really, Bud RDCs, which are also available in N scale. This choice of these diesels is really what set the era at 1955. The last year of steam on the CNJ Newark branch was 1954. And since there are not available models or no available models of C&J steam locomotives that I'd need for this line in N scale, I settled on the year 1955, which seemed an appropriate year and an appropriate marker to use for this layout. So, how did I come up with the initial design for the C&J Newark branch? All right, so the site was a Brooklyn apartment living room, and I'm talking about the very first C&J layout that I built. And I know I wanted to model specific locations. On the right, you'll see that line map, that line diagram again, and the first C&J layout really just covered from Newark Broad Street Station to East Ferry Street, with staging representing everything else after that. And the second C&J layout extended, which we'll see, extended the first one to Brill's Yard, Brill's Junction, as it was called, and with staging representing everything after that. The first C&J included Newark Broad Street Terminal, East Ferry Street, and staging. And then these two in bold are the two layout design elements that I added when I expanded the C&J. You can see some of the other basic specs here on the scale, era, and so on. But what I want to mostly draw your attention to is what's in this rectangle here, which are the things that I really enjoy about model railroading, and that I wanted this layout to cater to specifically. So as you'll go along, you'll see that these items, the urban scenery and hand laying track, and the opportunity to scratch build unique structures, those are all things that I wanted to maximize on this layout. In addition to that, I wanted this layout to be a test bed and an exploration of an alternative modeling style. We call it artistic minimal, that was not necessarily literal, and that was a little more abstract, what I call purposefully non-realistic. And I wanted that layout to really, or the attempt at doing that, to really force me to come up with new ways of looking at how to design a layout, the use of new materials and techniques, because I felt that if I was really doing something new, then I would probably have to invent some techniques or use existing techniques in a different way in order to accomplish my goals. And then lastly, and we'll see this apply to the first C&J, but mostly to the second one, is that I wanted to keep the room, wherever the layout was, I wanted to keep that room nice. You know, this is sort of a man cave, but I'll say I wanted to take the cave out of man cave and make it a really nice place to enjoy the hobby and do my work and just be able to relax. Let's see here. Sure, yes, there we go. Okay, so looking at some of the first LDEs for the initial version of the C&J Newark branch, this one is the big one, LDE 1. I don't know if that black bar is showing. I'm not really sure how to get rid of that, but I'll call this LDE 1, and it represents the end of the line. So this is Newark Broad Street Terminal. And I picked this one, which was kind of obvious because it's got the most stuff, the most opportunities. Here you had a set of team tracks, you had station platforms, you had a freight house, you had a warehouse, there was a small engine terminal, there was a this bridge over the Pennsylvania Railroad, which was running this direction. And this little interlocking tower, which was a really beautiful tower up on stilts. And this just kind of had a little bit of everything. And this could be almost a layout in and of itself. And not only that, but the real bonus was that it was already small. If I modeled it full size, it would have been taken up approximately 15.5 to 16 feet in end scale. And, you know, I had most of that room. I ended up compressing it a little bit, probably to about 70 to 80% of its size, so that I could fit East Ferry Street and some staging. But I was able to get most of what I wanted and get most of that in on the first version of the CNJ Newark branch. The second LDE that I had in mind was East Ferry Street. And why did I like that? Well, there was a lot going on at East Ferry Street. First of all, there was this large industry. This was a coal yard, Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre Coal. And one of the interesting things, I would call it maybe a signature element of the CNJ, was that you'll see these yellow dashed line areas here, all through here. Those were all industry tracks that were elevated up on very flimsy looking trestle work. And I thought that that was another really interesting contrast. You can see up at the upper right, this was the Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre Coal Company after a fire, unfortunately, in 1961. But you can see how this is all up on trestle work right next to the main part of the line, which was up on a heavy concrete embankment. This scene also was very dynamic because you have the elevated CNJ Newark branch, but then you have the streets that run below. And this creates, in this particular area, this creates a triangular bi-level passenger station, which you can see right here at the lower right. And I just thought that the juxtaposition of all of these items coming together was something that I really had to explore and had to include. Speaking of design, one thing I do want to point out here is a lot of model railroaders are interested in the urban context and urban subject matter. And I hear often, I really like the urban feel and how it's really complicated and dense, and there's all these things going on. And one of the things to understand about why urban railroads and urban model railroads, when they're done well, look that way, is that they're actually not as complicated as you think. And what's really happening is that you have multiple independent systems that are simple in and of themselves that are coming together. And that's what makes for the complexity. So just as a quick example of that, so you can think of one element as being this line of the railroad, and by itself, it's very simple, straight line, and it's just going on its way, and the industries are roughly parallel to the line, very simple, not an issue. The other system that you can see here is this system of streets, which are on a grid, right? Not necessarily a rectangular grid, but a grid, different ones. These are running at a different angle than these. And when this system hits the system of the railroad, you get something interesting. And then when you add in the idea or the fact that the railroad is elevated in order to accommodate this other system of the streets, right? Because the railroad, if there's enough business, they don't want to be at grade because that's very disruptive to their operations. There's lots of accidents and they don't want that. If there's enough business on the line, they'll do something like either put it in a cut or they'll elevate it. In this case, they elevated it. And so then when you add that, then you get this, maybe you could call it a trifecta of, this triangular bi-level station with a pin-connected skewed truss bridge going over East Ferry Street. And it's not something that's necessarily artificially complicated. It's actually very simple systems just coming together. And that's where the magic happens. And for anyone who's contemplating doing a prototype urban layout or doing a freelance version, it might be helpful to keep that in mind as you're looking at your subject matter to try to understand that and extrapolate the main things that are going to carry your idea forward when it's actually built as a model railroad. So this is a track plan of the first iteration of the CNJ Newark branch. And you'll see here, the bulk of this is Newark Broad Street Terminal. And again, this was only reduced, maybe 10 to 20%, 20 to 30%. And then I added a very compressed version of East Ferry Street because I just had to get that skewed truss bridge in there. And I flipped East Ferry Street north to south and east to west so that I could get the tail end of Lehigh and Wilkes-Barre Coal in there. And then there was a very small lift out staging yard, which I used as a filler yard that went from the edge of the wall that crossed over the entrance to the room. And this actually worked out really well. It gave me a lot of pleasure in having, operating sessions just, on a Friday or Saturday night, at or after work. And so I got a lot of use out of that. Some of the other items I might point out about this design.
Jonathan,
yes?
You might have cut out for just a minute
Okay.
when you were first explaining the piece of the at the Rube entrance. The first,
okay.
the very first
Sure.
part of that.
Okay, sure. So this piece was a lift out fiddle yard, staging fiddle yard that I built this during COVID. And this little piece was great. It really helped to maximize the operation of the layout and contributed to a lot of impromptu solar operating sessions, on late on Friday or Saturday nights or after work. And I got a lot of use out of that little staging yard. Some of the other items I'll note here are using this, what I call a design train length. I set this very early in the design process because that set the length of my longest spurs and my longest passing sidings. And I basically use that as a unit of measure in determining the lengths of certain pieces of the layout so that everything would end up working correctly when I try to move forward to operations. All right, moving on to CNJ Newark Branch number 2. The layout gets a new home. So in late 2021, I had been looking for a new apartment, and I happened upon one that actually wasn't far from my initial one in Brooklyn, New York. And I basically hit the jackpot because this was a 2-bedroom, very nice 2-bedroom pre-war apartment that through a quirk of history had 2 living rooms. So one of them, actually both of them are about the same size, but the spare living room that was available as part of the apartment was 12 feet 8 by 20 feet long. And I saw this on the floor plan and I hopped on my bike the minute I saw it, and I rode over there to look at it because it was open that day. And I walked in there and I said, okay, this is perfect. Somehow luck has found me, and I managed to put in an offer and I got the apartment. So this would become the scene of CNJ Newark Branch number 2. There was a small closet here, which when I renovated the apartment, I demolished that. And you can see the room here on the upper right, what it looked like before, and then on the lower right, what it looked like during the renovation. So with some additional space in hand, I started designing things to add to my existing CNJ Newark branch. And one of these new layout design elements that I wanted to include was the Jefferson Street Bridge. And I thought this bridge was very special because of its odd geometry. It's again, it's an extremely heavy truss bridge, what they call a Baltimore truss, that has this horizontal member here, stiffening these vertical members. And it's highly asymmetrical. From the top, it's a trapezoid shape with a 4-panel truss on one side and a 7-panel truss on the other. So you can see this top view. This is the 4-panel side. This is the 7-panel side. And you can see this very strange geometry, how there's so much skew to it that it almost looks like that portion of that portal of the bridge is almost, it's like it's almost facing what would be the aisle, or almost parallel to the railroad. And this is something that I thought was just really interesting from a visual and architectural and engineering point of view. And I said, gotta have that one. Plus the bonus was that there were 2 industries nearby, so I could get those in. The second LDE that I decided to add was this one at Brill's Junction. And this one was also special to me for a few reasons. One is that it had a tailor-made entry and exit for staging, which we see right down here, where the Pennsylvania Railroad's P&H branch went over top of the CNJ Newark branch. There was also a highway bridge right next to the PRR, and you can see it down here. And I thought, this is great. This will be perfect for entry exit to staging. Here's a close-up view of it right here. And again, it just has that really sort of dense urban feeling where there's just like so many things going on. You've got 2 bridges going over top of the, several tracks of the CNJ with an interlocking tower. This is BT Tower right here. And the signal bridges, one you can see right here, which is this one. And then there's another one down here. So you've got this interlocking, and it just had all these things. And again, would give me a really, what I would call, gracious entry into staging. In addition to that, you had some industries down here, especially this one, Ballantine Beer with the famous 3 rings. Remember this because I'm going to come to it later when I show you the final design for the extension. But there were just so many things here, and it was so rich, and it would give me a good way to quote unquote end the model version of the layout. Not only that, but one other thing I do want to mention is operationally at the Newark end of the layout, I had NA Tower, and adding this LDE would give me BT Tower. So now I had the opportunity to have the layout run and have it operate between 2 towers, so 2 natural control points. And that made a lot of sense to me. So I felt like I was getting a lot out of this one particular LDE if I decided to include it on the layout, which I did. So getting into some design here. So
Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Just want to try one more thing to see if we can get rid of that black bar.
Okay.
If you go down to that bar, which I think is your menu, over on the far right, there's more. Click on more and see if you have a hide floating menu.
Yes.
Click hide floating.
How about that?
Alrighty.
All right. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay, so starting to think about actual layout design here. And these sketches are important because they show a little bit of my process for how I design. But just first, a few things that I was looking for in this extension. So I definitely wanted to have a permanent staging yard. I had the small fiddle yard on CNJ version number 1, and that was fine, but I really wanted something more substantial, and I wanted something with a loop so I could turn trains, reuse commuter trains, and it would just make operation of the layout a lot more fluid. I wanted to have some more room for East Ferry Street so I could do it justice, so I didn't have to flip its orientation just to get it to fit. As we were saying before, I wanted to include these new LDEs of Jefferson Street and BT Tower, Brills Junction. I wanted Brills to function as a gracious entry to staging. And on top of that, I didn't want to build too much. I didn't want to build a layout that would overwhelm me, and I didn't want to build a layout that would overwhelm the room. I wanted to keep the room, especially the center of the room, as open as possible. So on the left here, these are my initial sketches. And what this is basically me thinking, what's the least I can build? And so this would represent the C&J branch that I had built already, that I would move to the new space with a bit of an extension and then right into staging. And this, you'll see this is kind of bent and sticking out into the room because initially I really didn't want to cross over the window because it's, it's a beautiful window. I didn't want to block the sunlight. So in sticking with that idea, here's another version of it where I expanded the staging to get a better sense of what the size of that would be. And then I said to myself, well, how am I going to get, Brills Junction in there? And I said, well, maybe if I kind of add a little bend here and add that onto the staging, maybe I can make that work. And then here's a sort of enlarged version of what that might have looked like. I thought this was a little bit small and a little bit too compressed, so started thinking a little bit bigger. This entry to the staging at Brills Junction was important to me, so that's kind of what you see here. So this is the C&J line continuing to Jersey City, as we saw in the straight line diagram in the beginning of the presentation. And then this is the C&J Newark branch turning down south towards Elizabethport. And then this would represent the PRR going over top and BT. And I wanted to have some flavor of that arrangement. In other words, the C&J disappearing under the bridge, and also the C&J just beginning to turn off and head south to Elizabethport with BT Tower. So starting to look at how I was going to fit everything into the room, not just the layout, but all the other stuff that I knew was going to be in there. And I'll take a few minutes and explain something here that might look odd. So you'll see these numbers that I have down here and up here. And this is a way that I use to do thumbnail sketches that I can keep roughly to scale. So what these numbers represent are the widths of elements that I know that I'm going to have in the room, and it allows me to kind of keep things in the proper perspective. So, for example, I know that this piece of the railroad is about 2 feet. It's actually a little bit less, but I always kind of oversize a little bit. I know I need an aisle of 3 feet. And then that leaves me, if I have something on the other side, a 2-foot wide shelf for railroad, and then that leaves me 5 feet. And it just kind of keeps everything in perspective, so I don't draw stuff that even at the thumbnail sketch level that is unrealistic. So you'll see more of the same up here. You'll see I'm still, this sort of bend with the link to the staging yard is, still left over from here and here. Trying to avoid the window with a space of about 2 feet, and then trying to figure out which way that loop should turn. Should it turn this way or should it turn that way? And including all the rest of the stuff that was going to go into the room, which is a large architect's table where I build my models, and perhaps a small sofa, the ceiling fan that was going to go on the ceiling in the middle, and then this idea right here, which is additional or supplemental lighting, and then the entry to the room right here. Just trying to think of all the components and put them in there and see what the sizing was and how that would all work out. After that, I started looking at some specific items in the room. I had these windows here, and I said, well, if I go across the window, how is that going to work? And setting, understanding the height that I wanted and how things like the air conditioner were going to work, and what was the relationship between the layout and the windowsill and that sort of thing. Just taking a little bit of time to think that through, because I didn't want it to be an accident, or I didn't want to start building and then get to the window and go, oh, what's going to happen here? So this just allowed me to think ahead a little bit about how that was all going to work. And we'll see a picture of this condition a little bit later. So moving on to the right, this is pretty much what I ended up with. And you'll see more of the same. You'll see these numbers here, just kind of keeping everything in perspective so I can do thumbnail sketches to roughly to scale. You'll see in this version, I have said, well, forget the window. I'm just going to go across it because I needed some straight length for Burrill's Junction. There was just no way to do it, going around a corner or anything like that. So I said, we'll figure out the window and we'll make it work. The windows are large, so I did end up with plenty of sunlight left over above at the very top and at the very bottom. So it ended up not being so bad. You'll see this line here, which represents the PRR at Burrill's Junction. And East Ferry Street, this is actually mislabeled. This is really going to be the Jefferson Street. And you'll see how I'm figuring out the staging and getting the loop in there, and then leaving plenty of room of the room open so that I can get my architect's table and then a work table in here, which is important because I don't have room in the apartment for a shop. So I need some place where I can either cut wood or cut large pieces of cardboard or foam for scratch building. And this roughly 7-foot by 13-foot space gave me plenty of room to put my work table, my desk, and then have still some room left over to circulate and just have everything fit in the room very nicely. And then this is another thumbnail sketch of what it might look like going into Burrill's Junction. That's right here. Just getting that signal bridge, BT tower, and then the PRR P&H branch here and the highway bridge here, just to give me a sense of what I wanted that to look like. Okay, and this is more or less the final plan. This is what I'm building now. You can see the old layout here, and then the new expansion going around this way. You'll see a room divider here. I'll have a better picture of that coming up soon. This helps support the reversing loop and the staging yard, and it prevents you from seeing all of the layout at once. You'll see my desk and the work table that I talked about, and then still enough room for a chair and a small coffee table and with some books and that sort of thing. So this can be a place where I can just come and hang out for a while. So you'll see this is the LDE of Jefferson Street with that crazy looking truss bridge, a view block here and a view block here, because the CNJ Newark branch is basically almost ramrod straight. So I didn't want to see a big curve in it. And then this scene here with another view block right here, that's basically, this is East Ferry Street with the coal yard and the skewed truss bridge, and then Burrill's Junction with BT Tower here. This is Ballantyne Beer, and then the PRR P&H branch going over the top, and then your entry into staging. As you saw in the last plan, I have this design train length here that helped me make sure I didn't make sidings and crossovers and other things too closely spaced or too far apart. The throat of this staging yard was very carefully designed. This went through a lot of iterations so that I can not only turn commuter trains, but I can use this for RDCs that come in and back in and then sit right here in this little pocket until they're ready to go again. So I just really wanted to have a way to make the operation of the passenger and commuter operations as fluid as possible. So there may be some more tweaks in this, but I think this is pretty much where this track arrangement is pretty much where I want things to be. So moving to the right, I'll spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's important. As an architect, which is my training and my job, we often use this drawing, a section drawing, as opposed to a plan, to really investigate the space of what we're making. And I sometimes feel like this drawing is a little bit underused in model railroad design. But it's a very important type of drawing because it lets you see and lets you design a lot of things that need to be thought about and that need to be looked at during layout design. So one of the things that was going to help me pull off the look of my layout that I was going after was going to have to do with framing, and that meant getting this valence arrangement correct in order to get the look that I wanted and to have it function visually like I wanted. And through many iterations and many thumbnail sketches, I discovered that the optimal placement of this valence is a function of several things. One is your layout height, the layout depth, the height of your lights above the layout, or above track level, which in this case is about 18 to 20 inches, somewhere in there. I like to bring the valence out from the lower fascia a little bit, if I can, because this helps to prevent backlighting of models. I often see pictures of models in the magazines and even online, even in videos, where this valence is lined up with the fascia, which seems like the thing to do, but actually a lot of times it creates backlighting, and that's something I wanted to avoid. The amount that this is out from the front varies. I like to make it at least 2 inches, which is barely enough to make a difference, but at least it's something. But if you can do it at more like 6 inches out, that's even better. The other important thing is where the bottom of the valence is. And I found that if you want the shadow box look, which is really just a way of saying you want the scene framed, which is very important for model railroading, so that you can see the trains in the perspective that you want them to be seen at. And your eyes can't wander all over the place. You want to frame the scene. And I found that if the bottom of this valence prevents you from seeing the top edge of the backdrop, then that will give you the look. So that's why I have this drawn here, where I'm at eye level, standing a normal distance away from the layout. Where does this need to be so that I can't see the very top edge of this backdrop? And that seems to have worked out for me, and you can see for yourself as I go through the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about lighting. My lighting is 2 strips of LED tape lights at about 3,500 Kelvin. I like things a little bit on the warmer side. So for me, I stay away from the 5,000 and 6,000 Kelvin lights, and then having these baffles, because as you'll see later, it's very important that I didn't have that I cut down the amount of light on the backdrop. I know that sounds weird, but it will make sense as we go through the presentation. Once my renovations in the apartment were done, I had to move C&J layout number 1. So in order to do that, I hired some fine art movers, and they were great. They came and they measured the layout, and actually they came, I think, 2 or 3 times to measure the layout and make sure they had everything right, make sure they could get stuff down the stairs and through my apartment building and everything. And they did a great job, and everything went off without a hitch. They made these cardboard crates for the sections of the railroad, and they, you know, drove it over in a truck, took it out of the truck, up the elevator in the new building, and set it on the standards and brackets, which I had pre-installed. In this view, this is taken toward the end of the renovations. The room, as you can see, is not 100% finished, but it's almost there. And this is the view block, and you'll notice that it's got a big rectangular hole in it. Why is that? For a few reasons. One, because I knew I'd be going across the window. I didn't want to cut down the amount of light entering the room. Right. Remember, I wanted to take the cave out of man cave here, so I didn't want to have some nice sunlight. That window faces south, so I get good light all day. The other reason is to allow for a connection through the whole room. So if I'm standing here, like where I'm taking this picture, I still have a connection all the way through to this part of the room. It doesn't look like there's a chunk of space that's been taken out of the room. One other reason for this square hole, which is the same reason why you see it doesn't, the room divider does not go all the way to the floor, nor does it go to the ceiling, is because I didn't want to create a microclimate here. Again, this window faces south, so there's some amount of heat gain. And if this had gone all the way to the ceiling and all the way to the floor, I didn't want it to be excessively warm here. And again, it creates some sort of microclimate on that side. So this cutout does a lot of things for me, and I'm really glad that I designed that into to this wall. There could be other situations where that might not have been the best idea, but here I think it actually fit pretty well. On the ceiling, you'll see the supplemental lighting. This is for general room lighting when I might be working in here, but not necessarily have the layout lights on. And they also will help with the backlighting effect, since I'll be able to have some light coming from the aisle. If I was to do this again, I would actually move this line in a little more and put it probably more like here, so I could get back a little farther from the layout. But this is something that I think I can make work. All right, so here we are at the meat of the presentation, and I'll try to go through this fast because we're burning up time here. So one of the things I wanted to achieve is I really wanted to think about how I can do a new approach to modeling, especially prototype modeling. This was my first foray into prototype modeling, and I said, you know, as model railroaders, we always want to show everything exactly. Everything has to be realistic, you know, as much as possible, everything, right? And you'll see on the right, you'll see a shot from my previous HO layout, and it takes that approach, right? Everything is modeled realistically. The track, the buildings in the background, the traveling crane, even on the backdrop, even that's fairly well detailed, although it might be toned down a little bit. The sky is blue, you know, everything's realistic. And I asked myself, you know, there's lots of examples in the art world or in other you know, visual media where that's not how things are done. And I wonder if there's a way to do that and apply it to model railroading, because sometimes a less realistic approach can be even more powerful, or get the idea across even more. And we often talk about making our layouts, our model railroads, more like art, but I don't feel like we do what artists do, or that we use the same similar process that they use. And so one way of thinking about this was, I said, well, a model railroad is a lot like a portrait, especially if you're doing prototype railroading, right? It's we have this image in a portrait of a person, or in our case of a railroad, and that person has some important qualities, enough that we want to make some depiction of them. But when artists do a portrait, they usually don't make everything exactly realistic or exactly as is. They usually you know, pump up certain things that they want to show, and then they tone down other things that they want to show. And that's how they get across the nature of the person in the portrait. And I thought, if I want to think differently about model railroading, maybe that's one way to approach it. How is this a portrait? How can I show the CNJ, or how can I show my model railroad in a different way, right? By making it not realistic, or by deciding what I wanted to be realistic and what I wanted to not be realistic. So I started looking at other visual arts for ideas about how to do this, including painting, film, architecture, and photography. And here are some examples of ideas that I found. So on the left, we have this portrait by a famous artist. Chuck Close is a very famous painting that he did in the 60s. And this is an interesting one because it's a portrait and it's extremely realistic. But he has used a couple of tools to take it out of the realm of realism and show himself, in this case, since it's a self-portrait, in a different light. Okay, to show himself in a different light. What are those tools? Well, even though it's realistic, he's decided to make it all monochrome, right? All black and white. The other tool is that he's supersized it, right? It's like 10 times life size. And by doing those things, he's showing us something in a way that we can't normally see it, that gives us a chance to see it in a different way, or to see certain things that are important, or what the artist thinks is important about the subject matter. Moving on to film, we have this still from the movie Dogville. This is a movie that I saw in 2006, and when I saw it, I said to myself, that could be an interesting way to depict a model railroad. And so in this movie, they had the scene, which was a small mining town, probably not too different than what you would model for, narrow gauge or some branch line in the mountains or something like that. But what they did was they decided to get rid of everything that wasn't directly part of the story, and only leave the stuff that was needed to tell the story. So, for example, you'll see over here, this is a church, and the only thing they have in the church is the door, these seats, the pews, this sort of lectern here, and then the bell tower with a rope, and that's it. There's no walls. They're only depicted as lines on the floor of the stage, and that's it. And what that does is it allows the actors to have a more direct interaction with the things that matter. And then by doing that, and by deleting or minimizing all the other stuff, right, it makes the actors and these accessories, these props, even more important, right? Because if everything is important, then nothing is important, right? In a way, you can think of it that way. So I thought that this was a fascinating way to depict something, and also given the black backdrop, which really surprisingly makes things pop out. And then also we have this here. Many of us are familiar with this photographer, Owen Stenlake. This is NNW switcher number 261. And this image shows a way of the tool that it shows is taking an everyday and ordinary object and putting it in a completely different context. In this case, taking a black painted steam locomotive and showing it at night. So, and somehow getting it to show up. And that's the genius of somebody like Owen Stenlake. And that's another tool that we can use. Take an everyday ordinary object and put it in a completely different context and see what happens. And that makes it appear special, because we have to now see it in a different way, in a way that we could never see it before. Architectural modeling. The way things are treated, very minimal, just enough to communicate the idea. You know, we can see these windows here. We understand that those are metal. We understand that this is a wood siding and that this is the roof. And then we understand the contours, but the contours aren't as important as this, and the background isn't as important as the rest of what's here. And by photographing against a jet black background, you're putting more focus on the subject matter, right? You're redirecting it. It seems like, you know, you might think, oh, well, if I, you know, a black backdrop's going to make everything disappear. Well, actually, no. It actually redirects the focus, and that's something that I thought was would be useful. So, how was I going to take these items and make them work for me on my model railroad? Well, I came up with a sort of a schema about how to do this, where the railroad equipment and right-of-way would be in full color, as would be the structures and industries that the railroad directly interfaced with, kind of like what we saw in the Dogville image. And then other items, structures that, and other items that are just context, which are necessary to make the other things shown in color, give them a reason, right? Those would be in monochromatic gray because they're not as important, right? Again, if everything's important, then nothing's important. So I'm trying to set up a hierarchy here. And then lastly, doing a backdrop in black velvet, something that would absorb the light and put the trains in a different perspective and redirect your viewpoint back onto the trains. So this would mostly be showcased in the signature scene on the layout, which is this one. Sorry for the slightly blurry slide. So this is the signature scene where you have the throat to the Newark Broad Street Terminal at the end of the line, the very western end of the line, and you have the CNJ Newark branch going here, going over top of the Pennsylvania Railroad's Northeast Corridor. This is the southern portal of Pennsylvania's Newark Penn Station, and I'm using this slide to show the things that I thought were important to have and include in the scene so that it would read as a prototype scene, so that it would remain recognizable. You know, I felt that if I didn't have these things, then something would be missing, and I would not communicate the idea of what this place was. So taking these elements and knowing that these were important, and then taking what I had learned from, you know, architectural models and painting, portraiture, and film, how did I put all those together? Well, when I did that, I ended up with this. And you can see how I've applied this. You can see the black backdrop, which I think does a very good job of highlighting the trains and putting your perspective, visual attention back onto them, and then balancing that with the realistic and then the abstract. So these things like this, the Pennsylvania Railroad going underneath the CNJ's Newark branch, are toned down. They're just enough so that you know what they are. So you get the context so that this bridge and this abutment and this bridge and this abutment makes sense, but they don't steal the show because they're not the most important thing. This is another view of how I've handled that. You can see in this modeling, once I put down these ties, I felt like that communicated the idea that these were railroad tracks and that these were station platforms, and that's as far as I needed to go. I didn't feel like I needed to add rails or anything like that. I didn't want to add too much. I just wanted to add just enough so that you knew what it was, so that it communicated the idea and still was able to set off the rest of what I was telling the viewer was important. In terms of what I enjoy about layout building, I mentioned scratch building before. So basically, with the exception of the equipment, everything in this scene is scratch built. This is something that I enjoy doing. And, you know, if you're going to do a prototype railroad, you're probably going to have to do some bit of scratch building because not everything is going to be available off the shelf or through kit bashing. Stealing an idea from Dogville, I depicted the streets as just a very dark gray with the street name printed directly onto the street. And actually, this font is universal. That font is one that the C&J used for many years for its logos and advertising and so on. This gives you an idea of the framing that I was talking about how the bottom of the valance hides the top of the backdrop, which gives you a very distinct frame, and maintaining this horizontality all the way down the layout. I think that this helps the backdrop to function, and it controls the view enough so that you can, it enabled me to show the layout and have it appear as I wanted to, and was able to allow me to control the view. Just a few photos of how this whole scene went together. You can see I'm relying on mostly wood and cardstock. There's a few Central Valley pieces here and some styrene, but mostly wood and cardstock to make this scene. You can see how the layout is built. It's just these hollow core panels on shelf standards and brackets with foam for the build up to create the elevated fill and embankment for the main line. Here you can see how I'm finishing that off. This was an example of creating a new technique. I made all of this out of cardstock, and then I came up with the idea to coat it all with a half-hard gesso to homogenize everything, and then painting it with acrylic colors and building up the layers, starting with a yellow. Yes, yellow seems weird, but it gives the concrete a very sort of warm color that comes from underneath once you start adding layers on top of the yellow, different layers of gray and slightly brown colors, and that really gave me the sense of heavy concrete. Just some in-progress shots of the scene. You can see again, most of these structures are built with cardstock, and I use a lot of printed textures. Here we have corrugated metal. We have a very worn corrugated metal roofing, and then the brick. And these textures have worked out very well for scratch building and end scale. This abutment is pretty close to the prototype. I measured it and then made a 3D model and had this 3D printed. Just some views of the east and west ends of Newark Broad Street Terminal. You can see here, this is NA Tower, also scratch built, and then the east end, and you can see here, and these little red push pins. This is me making dummy signals so I can begin to figure out how this interlocking is going to work and how I'm going to place those signals properly. This shows East Ferry Street. I never got this scene completely finished, but you can see the skewed truss bridge and the triangular bi-level station over here, and then this little lift out staging yard in front of the entry, which was built basically out of foam sheets stiffened with some very light wood strips, and it actually worked very well. Some shots of the new construction. So on the left, you'll see looking towards Burroughs Junction right here. This is just a quick mock-up of the P&H branch going over the C&J Newark branch. And then you'll see the area for the staging yard on this side. Looking back the other way, again, I feel like this really shows how the framing and the black backdrop work. You can see how dark that is. And then keeping the horizontality, which really helps maintain the frame so that the railroad is seen in a certain way, and you're limiting the amount of travel of someone's eyes so that you get the point of view that you really want them to have. Here you can see the air conditioner and how I figured from that sketch that I had before about how this layout was going to go across the window. Here's another view of that. The black velvet backdrop. This is one where I had to figure out a new technique. It's new for me. It's not really new. This is essentially straight out of theatrical scenery book 101. Literally, I think at some point I photocopied something out of an old book that I found. But it's basically a plywood frame with the black velvet stapled to it, and then these portals cut out so that the elevated line can stick through there. Here you'll see the lighting. These are just LED tape lights affixed to aluminum strips. The aluminum strips are important because the adhesive for the LED strip lights does not like materials that are dusty. So you can try to stick them on wood, but I don't know that that adhesive will hold up well there. But if you use aluminum strips or even plexiglass or styrene strips, that will probably work a lot better. And just a quick panoramic of what the layout room looks like. So you'll see this is CNJ number 1. Here's the scene divider. You can see through the hole again, connecting the room to what would be Brills Junction and East Ferry Street. You can see my work table where I build most of my models, and I also use this as an office. And then here's the work table where I do heavier work. You can see there's a large cutting board here and so on, so I can do those things. And didn't want to leave out operations. That's also something that I enjoy. Lots of chances to do things with operations on the passenger side. There's the commuter trains, which interestingly enough used to back in from Jersey City or even from Elizabethport. And that's an interesting move that I made in some of my impromptu operating sessions. And there's other opportunities as well. There's the passenger switching in the terminal. There's RDCs operating, and just lots of interesting things to do with passenger ops on this layout with this prototype. I have a quick video here. Let me see if I can get this to work. Pointer. Let's see, arrow options, automatic. Let me see. Let's see if I can do this. Not sure how I can. Oh, here we go. There it goes. All right, so this video is it's maybe like a minute and a half. It's not very long. Should be finishing up fairly quickly here. These are touch toggles from Barrett Hill Designs, and I've used these throughout the layout, and they've worked out very well for me. So this was another sort of impromptu op session that I had probably on a weekend evening or maybe some weekday after work. Just to show that the layout doesn't have to be totally finished, and that I was able to enjoy it even while the bulk of it remained under construction. And you'll see the small staging yard coming up here. This is East Ferry Street, and then into staging. So great. On the freight operations side, same thing, lots of variety. These are some of the local trains that I plan to have that do different things as they go up and down the line, have different responsibilities. There's always the potential for tower operators. You saw in the previous video where I sort of did that, operated those toggles to throw the switches. That was my way of representing the tower. For car forwarding, I use a switch list, which you can see here. Let me see if I can put my pointer back on. There we go. You can see it here. It's basically something that I printed. It's a PDF. I printed on an 8.5 by 11. I fold it in half. Got a diagram on one side, a switch list on the other, which you can see here, and it works great. I found that because I don't have a classification yard, that basically means there's not really much routing. So everything is either terminating on the layout or it's leaving the layout. So without routing, I found that actually a switch list works pretty well. Another quick video here. Let me see if I can. See if I can get this one to go. Come on. There we go. So this just, again, it's a short video. It's about 2 minutes. It just shows switching in Newark Broad Street. So again, this is just another impromptu session that I had on probably a Saturday night. And it's really just a chance to, stage some cars in the yard and, write up a switch list. And, just for maybe 45 minutes or an hour, just bang some cars around and have a little bit of fun. And that's something that I really enjoy about this small layout. Yeah, nothing too fancy. One thing that I'll point out is one of the things I found interesting about this prototype track layout is that this is basically a yard lead, pretty much like you draw it up, getting advice from the LDSIG. So a true to life yard lead, and it was designed to work this way, just as you see it here operating. As a matter of fact, this turnout, which was a Y, was the normal aspect of it was this way into the yard. Reverse was allowing something to do a reverse move. So it's interesting just to see that this yard lead is really the heart of allowing all of this to be serviced at this facility. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, so coming to the very end here, I'll finish this very quickly. So what am I doing now? Well, I am not in Brooklyn right now, as Chris Mesa alluded to. I actually am currently, I'm living in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So you may be wondering, well, how am I continuing to work on the layout when I'm literally half a world away? Well, I brought materials with me and plans, and I'm continuing to build structures and other parts so that when I return to the United States from time to time, or when I'm finished with my my duties in Saudi Arabia, I can easily and quickly populate the layout with other needed structures and other items such as turnouts and so on. This is a plate girder bridge, one of about 5 that I've got to build. Again, relying again on the cardstock and wood strip method, which builds up quite nicely. And this is a project that I'm just starting. This is the Jefferson Street Bridge, and I'm very excited about this one. So on the left, you'll see my AutoCAD drawing, which I based on the prototype drawing. Someone sent me plans of that, and I was able to overlay, and there was some distortion in the prototype drawing, but I managed to correct for that and get the proper measurements and sizes and angles on these members. And you'll see up here, I created a template for a test member, which you see right here, just to kind of test if I could do this and what my techniques would be, and you know, trying to figure out all the tricks of making this work. But you can see it's working out pretty good. Even the individual lacing applied here, which hasn't been too much of a chore. So I'm continuing to make progress on the layout, even though I am halfway around the world. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'm happy, Chris, to take any questions that anybody might have.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, excuse me, breaking stuff in my office. I didn't see any, there was some comments about really like to see more, get maybe an article about your eyesight
Oops.
and balance work that you did.
Mhm.
But let's go. I see a couple questions coming in.
Okay.
Is this CNJ warehouse laser cut?
Yes, I did some AutoCAD drawings of that after some measurements that I took on site, and I sent them to a friend and fellow modeler Bernie Kempinski, and he was able to cut those parts for me.
A question I had is on, I can't remember the name of the yard that was to the far right, the one that moved, that you pull out. How does that go in and out for where the entrance is?
Yeah, it basically just lifted straight out. I built it with some dovetail joints so I could kind of get it set and then just push it down. And the ends of the rails were attached to a PC board so that they stayed in alignment, and it worked out great.
All right, so just the butt adjoinment of the rails there.
Yeah, yeah. Even in that scale, it worked out.
Yeah, great. Let's see, and if you have a question you'd like to ask, go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is Mark Needing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I tuned in a little late. Grandson's not doing well, but anyway, down here in the layout room, I model a kind of a point-to-point terminal yard, Jones Island in Milwaukee, and I love the way you've got the street names written right on the streets themselves, but doesn't that somehow detract when you take prototype pictures?
It depends on what you want. For me, no, because there are already other things, and part of the whole idea of the layout is that there are these other things that are not quote unquote realistic.
Okay.
So the idea of having something like that right next to something that is realistic, like you can see in this picture in the background here, is that doesn't sway me. It's kind of like the picture that I showed you of I don't know if you were here when I went over this, of the movie Dogville,
Yeah.
where there were those sort of bits written on the floor, and that's not really a distraction. It's kind of telling you that there's something there that's kind of important, but it's not the most important. And to me, it's not a distraction. It's just telling you some additional information.
I suppose I can see from your perspective, you're not cluttering it up with automobiles and trucks and things like
Correct.
that anyway. So
Correct. Correct. Exactly.
it's just, are you going to lay the track on those leads, or is it that just the ties symbolize the track?
Note the ties symbolize the track. Once you
Okay.
put the ties there, that basically communicates everybody knows, even non-model railroaders can figure out that that's track, and that's as far as I need to go. It doesn't
That's
have
very
to
cool.
go any farther
All
than
right.
that. Right.
Thank you. That was excellent.
So, Jonathan, another question I had on that that relates to that. I think in that one pitch photo you showed where the platforms were underneath the bridge,
Mhm.
you had the gray tone there, and then I think in some of the videos I saw that you were using multiple gray tones.
Mhm.
What what was kind of the cutoff for your keeping single monotone versus multiple shades of gray?
Yeah. Well, what I ended up doing was I knew I needed or wanted some differentiation. So I basically picked, I believe there are three grays on the layout. One is this gray, which you see here on the tracks, and it's on this structure in the background. That's call it gray number one. Gray number two is this one showing the streets, because I just wanted them to, I wanted them to be a little bit different so that you could identify it as a different system, right? There's the railroad, that's one system. Then there's these streets, which are repetitive, that's another system. And then the third gray is what I use to paint the streets with, which is almost black, but it's really a very dark gray. And that was just a way of giving a little bit of differentiation to things. And using the dark gray streets gave it some depth because, visually speaking, dark things or black things sort of recede, right? So that was a way of giving it some visual depth. If I had painted all of this gray, maybe it could have worked, but I think it might have looked a little bit flat. And so by painting the streets and the sidewalks slightly darker version of gray, that gave me just enough hierarchy to make things pop a little bit. I think also some of the roofs of these gray buildings are painted with this dark gray for similar reasons.
Hey, Bob, looks like you had a question. Or maybe you're still muted.
Yes. Jonathan, excellent presentation. I saw the hindsight one, and this was a really great addition and longer version. So
Thank you.
my question is, when someone, a model railroader, walks into the room for the first time and sees the way you're presenting what's important and what's not important, like the Pennsylvania tracks, how do they react?
I think they'll get it, but I think it still seems very different because it is. It's not what we're used to, and that was something that for me that I wanted to push back against, because I asked myself, well, what we make everything realistic, and I said to myself, if I was making a piece of art, or if I was doing something in architecture, my process would not be that. My process would not be to recreate everything literally, or just to simply replicate everything. So I'm kind of like, why am I doing it here, in model railroading? So I think people get it, but I think it's very different than what we're used to. And I think they recognize that too. And, I can't read minds, but they're probably thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting. It's kind of cool. I get what he's doing. I don't know if I want to do that though. But, again, I can't read anybody's mind, but that would be my answer to the question.
All right, thanks.
Jonathan, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm delighted with your presentation. I think you're really an original thinker.
Thank
Two
you.
two other original people. One you've mentioned already, which is Vic Roseman. The other
Mhm.
one who's making a lot of popular impressions among model railroaders is Lance Mindheim.
Yes.
Last couple of years has been stressing more of a study of art principles and composition and spacing and so on. Before Vic Roseman died, or more
Mhm.
recently with Lance, have you
Mhm.
had any interactions with either of them to get a cross check on their perspectives and take, and how they would, make their case for what their, positioning is?
Okay, yes, yes and no. I had a lot of interaction with Vic Roseman. And when I was in my old apartment, he came and visited the layout several times, probably 3 or 4 times. And we went to a Brooklyn diner, and we had lunch a couple of times. And I corresponded with him. He gave me a lot of photographs and prototype material. So, and he actually, and then it turns out he actually lived only maybe, I don't know, 10-minute walk away from me. He lived in the neighborhood. So yes. And unfortunately, Victor passed away during the last year when he was trying to recover. Myself and a few other Brooklyn model railroaders would actually spend some time going to visit him. We probably visited him probably, I don't know, once every couple of weeks or so in the hospital where he was recovering. Unfortunately, he didn't recover fully, and we're all sad, very sad about that. But yes, he was very interested in what I was doing, and was very helpful in helping me get information on the CNJ Newark branch. Now, Lance Milheim is a fantastic modeler, and I've been to his layouts a couple of times, and I've read many of his books, bought many of his books, especially the last one on model railroading as art, and I found them to be very insightful. And I found that his ideas and techniques are something that I think the hobby can definitely benefit from, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I don't know that I don't think I've had any specific conversations with him about what I've done, but I admire his work, and I think the principles that he talks about in his books are spot on. He's even talked about looking to other sources like painting and film. So I'm not the first one to think of that, or to talk about it, or put it out there in the hobby press. I think his perspective is a little bit different. I think he looks at those things more for sort of compositional um, techniques and lessons on color, and how things are arranged, and how to visualize them to make things more realistic. Whereas I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective about how to conceive of a model railroad in a completely different light. So I think his focus is a little bit different than mine, but I think there's definitely some bit of overlap between us.
Here's another idea for conversation. I'm intrigued with humanizing the hobby of model railroading by shifting the emphasis from the physical presentation to the jobs and the railroaders and their jobs, and picking up on some of the things that Tony Custer and Jack Ozanich and others have begun to introduce, which is making the subject focus be on the operators and paying enhanced attention to the paperwork and to the procedures. The line that I use is that Shakespeare has been staged, using wooden crates and street clothing, and yet the script is, so memorable and insightful that Broadway productions or whatever, attract crowds and convey a lot of lessons to an audience. Any comments on taking something like your layout and perhaps enhancing it by, doing more with the operations, the paperwork, the rituals, the communications, management functions and so on?
Sure. Part of the idea or one of the things I wanted to get out of this layout was to, even though it was a small layout, I wanted to give it big layout features. So, for example, there are a lot of opportunities to model other jobs on the layout, like, for example, tower operators. And now that the new extension will have two of them, you know, they can talk to each other and hand trains off, just like would happen on the real railroad. You know, the switching jobs and the other jobs that go along with this layout can be divided into individual jobs, and so that each train is doing a specific thing and has a specific purpose on the layout. You know, I eventually I would like to have signaling on this layout. You know, the electronics and that sort of thing are not really my forte, but I hope to get there if I just kind of keep pushing on it. But that's something else that I'd like to have be a part of the layout. So I agree that that's doing that and including the sort of jobs aspect definitely extends the play value of our layouts. And this one was designed to have a lot of play value, whether, you know, that I could decide to exploit or not. Like I don't have to do the tower jobs. I can just be there by myself and operate a local or operate a few commuter trains back and forth. But the opportunities are there for much richer enjoyment of the layout and many other jobs besides, you know, running a local or something like that.
Mark Nading, can I add to that just a bit?
Sure.
I've seen some apps for cell phone throttles that actually give you the opportunity to know how many seconds to pump up the air and how many seconds to give me 3 steps, for instance, and adding them to some of those jobs you said, especially your engineer conductor on a small layout, can really expand the size of the layout. Even the time it takes for one train to traverse, you know, from the terminal down to staging. If you have to make some stops and cut off a car, add a car, blow up the air, et cetera, that could be a lot of fun. I use that at times on mine.
Absolutely. When I've had these sessions on my own, I often really think about where how the head end and rear end brakemen are interacting. Like where are they?
Cool.
How can I set this up so that they're not doing a lot of walking, right? Because that's what a real crew tries to do, so that they don't have the brakemen, you know, kind of walking. You know, when do they ride on the locomotive? When are they going to ride on the car? And I try to think about that as I'm operating, and that's something you can do on a small layout, because I can just stage a few cars and, you know, head off to Newark and, you know, switch some stuff around for, you know, half hour, 45 minutes. And, you know, you can kind of immerse yourself like that. And it can be a lot of fun. And I enjoy that aspect of the hobby.
This is Doug again. I guess the question I wanted to ask was, how do you push the frontiers of simulating the operation beyond what you might have been describing as the state of the art in terms of walking time? For example, modeling the Friday afternoon rush hour with the trains going down to Atlantic City, the LCL that's on a schedule that has to be picked up and moved to Elizabethport to make its long distance connections, introducing some of the finer time kind of matters as an aspect of it that's seldom modeled, but is just another dimension to the real world that could be overlaid into what you've done. And it's kind of like the plot to the storyline, like Shakespeare would have a script. It's not just what I call a high school production. It's more a Tony Award-winning production.
Yeah. Well, there is again, I tried to make this layout so that it had many levels. Like it can just be me banging around a few cars on a Saturday night, but it can have all these other jobs, from, you know, the tower operator to commuter train operators. One of the reasons why I really pushed to have staging with a loop is because it would be really interesting to, as you say, Doug, like model, 5 p.m. on a Saturday, on a Friday, in 1955, and put the commuter trains, have them computer controlled with the software like Train Controller, which is the German software that you see a lot of European modelers using, and just have these commuter trains cycling in and out by themselves, and then you're the guy either in the tower routing these trains in and out, or maybe you are a local making your way up the line, dodging in and out, or maybe you got to sit there and wait for 2 or 3 trains to go by until there's a gap. Then you run up to the next to Newark, something like that. And you can through a computer, and if you have your staging and other things arranged properly, you can allow for the possibility of those things. And that's an idea I have for the future. Again, I don't know if I'll get there, and the computer stuff and the electronics is not my forte, but if I do find myself with far enough along that I can get to that, I will undertake it, and hopefully bumble along until I figure it out and get it to work.
Any other
Any-
questions?
Mhm.
There was one, I guess, more for me, and that will be, yes, this will be posted up, and with Jonathan's permission, I will also put the PDF that we have there. It'll be put up on the video will be up on YouTube, but you'll find the link on our webpage. Give me a couple days. Unfortunately, as many of you probably know, another problem to debug right now relating to our issue. So
I have one quick question for Jonathan before we close, and this is just a curiosity question, Jonathan.
Sure.
Since you've shared with us that you're overseas in Riyadh, have you met any other model railroaders over there? Can you tell us?
Yes and no. I've tried to look for others. I know that there's a guy on YouTube called Dubai Trains. He's not in Riyadh, but he's in Dubai, and I've reached out to him, and he's responded, but he hasn't really engaged. I guess, hey, come on over. It hasn't been anything like that. So I know of him, but there is one guy in the office, and he's a Canadian gentleman, and he and I have talked about model railroading, and he actually is interested in building a small N-scale tabletop railroad in his apartment. And I've been giving him some advice on track to use and some basic choices. So perhaps I've found another model railroader to indoctrinate into the LDSIG.
That's right.
That's one, and maybe there will be others as I spend more time here.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Jonathan, I have an addition to suggest before this is put on the digital file, which is to include your email.
Okay.
And in this day and age, perhaps even your phone, if you're willing to do that, but also to cite the Layout Design Journal that gave you 15 pages as a feature coverage. And if there's anything else that the audience might have access to, either on YouTube or any other places, that might enhance the appeal or the utility of communicating.
Yeah, so I'll put up this, let me see if I can do a full screen here. So you'll see on the lower left, let me see if I can get rid of this bar again. There we go. You'll see on the lower left, I have a Facebook page, the CNJ Newark, actually, sorry, on the lower right here, the CNJ Newark branch in Brooklyn. So people can go on over there and see what I've been up to. There's in the files section, you'll find some track plans. And if you look through some of the past posts, you'll see some videos. I think I've filed them away in a folder section, but you'll see some videos that I've done. I've cut down a little bit on the videos because since I've been over
Tony.
here, making my transition is kind of taking some time away from that. But there's maybe 10 or 11 of them there. And you'll see I've had the layout's been in model railroad planning just last year, 2023, and also in the LDJ back in 2018. So there are some other resources if people are interested.
And what's the website again?
It's a Facebook page. It's the CNJ Newark branch in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay, I'm already a part of it. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Jonathan.
All right. Have a good night,
Jonathan?
everybody.
Robert,
Yes.
did you have something?
Yeah, Jonathan, I
Okay,
want to thank
sure.
you for taking the time to present today. And
Mhm.
I would remind those of you that are LDSIG members to please check your membership and make sure that we have your correct email address in order to get copies of the LDJ to you. And those of you that are not members, please take the opportunity to sign up and by going to ldsig.org and push the button for join. We would like to present more of these activities, and I think you'll find the content interesting and worthwhile.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, and Jonathan, just last thing, I just want to thank you for your time. Not sure if you got a chance to eat dinner yet.
Not yet. It's coming right up.
All right, so we'll let you go. Thanks
Okay.
everybody for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thanks.
Again, I want to thank everybody who is attending today, and especially want to thank Jonathan for his presentation. It was very insightful, and I'll work to get that up on to the website and YouTube as soon as possible, and I will post messages in our appropriate forums. Thanks.